Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
Well, some of the voices, some of the opinions and some of the highlights and indeed the low times of President John F. Kennedy's time as President of America. I'm joined now from Washington by Ian Houston, who writes for the Herald and is an honorary professor at the University of the West of Scotland. Ian, good morning to you.
Happy morning to you, Nick, and to all your listeners. I'm grateful to be with you.
Well, thank you indeed for joining us, Ian. So, I mean, we're 60 years, coming up to the 60th anniversary of the assassination of JFK. I certainly was unaware of his Scottish connections, Ian. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Profound connections. So, Nick, what happened in 1939 when it starts? So he was sent as a 22-year-old Harvard student by his father, who was ambassador to the UK at the time, up to Glasgow for a very sensitive visit. This related to the sinking of the Antia ship, which was actually built in Govan. The Nazis had sunk and torpedoed this ship, 117 civilian passengers on board, including 28 Americans, 54 Canadians had been killed. There were 150 Americans that were really traumatized, the survivors, to take care of and to get back home. So Kennedy went up to speak to these families, to meet with government officials, and he actually went to the Beresford Hotel at Sauchiehall Street in Glasgow, which is still there, and he spoke to these families. He spoke to the leaders of Glasgow at the time. The Lord Provost, Sir Patrick Dolan, was there, and it was his first international speech that he ever gave, Nick. And
in Glasgow?
He was 20 in Glasgow, and he was 22 years old. So he carried that memory with him for the rest of his life, and we can all embrace the idea when we're 22 years old and we stand up and do something like that, how seminal it would be in our lives. And so for him, we always speak of that Irish connection that Kennedy has, and of course that's quite deep.
Sure.
But the emotional connection that he had to Scotland and Glasgow specifically was quite extraordinary.
Yeah, we've managed to unearth some audio too, because whatever he saw in Scotland, he obviously liked it, because here is a clip of JFK speaking about his fondness in particular for the Black Watch Pipe Band.
And we're proud to have them here also because they are a Scottish regiment. And that green and misty country has sent hundreds and thousands of Scottish men and women to the United States, and they have been among our finest citizens. And we're proud to have them here finally because, speaking personally, the history of Scotland captured me at a very young age. The United States, in fact, all of us love, I suppose, in a sense, lost causes. And on occasion, the history of Scotland has been a lost cause. But in some ways, they have triumphed.
And that clip from the JFK library there for us, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. How do you think his relationship with Scotland and his time here then impacted on his career within politics and beyond politics too?
Well, first of all, central to his philosophy of politics, it was a spirit of hope. It was a spirit of optimism, of buoyancy, of serving people in need. And that came out from that experience as a 22-year-old in Glasgow. But we also hear that in that clip, the voice of his poetic nature. He, of course, these were very complex times. It's important as we look at this history that we look at it through a balanced and realistic lens. But that spirit of Camelot, I suppose, that Jackie Kennedy called it, is still with us. It's because his leadership style was a light of promise, of possibilities. And I think his time in Glasgow shaped that. And so when he thinks of, it's not just that experience. I'm sure he, as a lover of poetry, was familiar with Robert Burns. He was familiar with the journey of a human being. And so he was a complex individual in that he was president. But I think had he not been president or a political leader, he would have been a writer, a poet. And so his style of leadership was a style that put the human spirit first.
It's remarkable as well hearing him speak about lost causes and his fondness for lost causes and the ultimate tragedy of John F. Kennedy and how his life ended. There is a melancholy to that perhaps fits with his idea of that link to Scotland and the landscape even of Scotland, as you say, the poetry of Scotland too.
Yes, and I would say also with that story, what the listeners should understand, that's a beautiful clip that you played. What's quite poignant about that is that appearance of Black Watch was only 2 weeks before that tragic day in Dallas. So what happened, he was so moved by that experience, it so penetrated him that after he was killed, Jackie Kennedy knew how important that visit of Black Watch was to the White House, that she requested that Black Watch or a small contingent of 9 pipers come back for the funeral. And they played at the funeral, played a number of different pieces. The brown-haired Maiden, the Badge of Scotland, the 51st Highland Division, the Barren Rocks of Aden, were all played by the pipers from Black Watch. And that request was made by Jackie Kennedy as a result of that clip that you just played. So it was a very poignant, emotional connection. I think it's important. Again, Ireland, naturally we should talk about Ireland in that connection. That was very powerful.
Absolutely.
But Scotland as well. And
his connection, I mean, being from Wexford in particular, we have a particular fondness for John F. Kennedy. That Celtic heritage that he had, and a number of American presidents also claim that Celtic heritage. Why is that ultimately, do you think, Ian, that there is that draw to Ireland, to Scotland too?
Well, the Scottish American diaspora, as he mentioned in that clip, so many men and women have come from Scotland, including my own father from Glasgow. It is such a motivator for individuals to give back, to maintain a connection back to that Celtic connection, you say, but to Scotland specifically. There's a real desire to give back in a variety of ways. It's a motivator for myself and for millions of other Americans to give back to whatever country they may be from, because they want to honor family. And I think ultimately, Nick, that's the driver for it. It's to honor family. How do we do that? So to Scottish Americans who may be out there and listening here, there's so much that we can do to uphold that light, to give back to Scotland and maintain these links. I'm a Global Scot. That's one specific way that the Global Scot Network helps Scottish Americans to give back. But I think for Kennedy, it was just a driver was family. And in fact, his great nephew is serving in Northern Ireland right now.
You'll find connections everywhere. It's like in Scotland and in Ireland, you'll find connections absolutely everywhere. Ian, we'll have to wrap it there. It's such a pleasure to talk to you, Ian. Thank you very much for joining us. Ian Houston, there, honorary professor at the University of the West of Scotland.